Will private companies take over the International Space Station? Which sci-fi stories need to be written? What's the state of the Canadian rocket market? And in Q&A Plus, a quick rundown of all my telescopes. All this and more in this question show. It's time for the question show. Your questions, my answers, as always, wherever you are across my channel. If a question pops in your brain, just write it down. I'll gather them up and I will answer them here. All right, let's get to the questions. DS8197, is there a private company that will put a temporary International Space Station module to start with to replace the current one to be deorbited? So the current plan, we actually got an update from NASA about what their current plans are for the International Space Station. And so originally the plan was they were going to just deorbit the International Space Station in 2030. And so they're going to get a sort of fancy version of Crew Dragon that's going to, or Cargo Dragon that's going to push the International Space Station out of orbit into the graveyard of the Pacific. But, you know, the problem is that leaves NASA without a place to send astronauts into space. They were building the Lunar Gateway, which would be this halfway point, gravitationally speaking, to the moon. But now it looks like that's going to be put on pause. So the new plan is that NASA is going to work with commercial operators to put a commercial module onto the International Space Station. And then private space station companies will add modules to that. So you've got VAST, and there's the other, on the Axiom Space is potentially building a space station. And I'm sure there's some other ones as well. And so they will add on to this module on the International Space Station. And then when it's time for the International Space Station to be deorbited, they will detach this commercial module from the station. The station will be deorbited. And now you'll have the beginnings of a new privately built space station. And then NASA will just pay for occupancy on this station to whoever is running it. And so then they'll be able to send out their astronauts in Crew Dragons. They'll be able to set up lab equipment, do work, visit the rest of the commercial space station. And so that is the plan. But building hardware for space is very complicated and very expensive. And it's amazing that there are companies that are planning to do this, companies that are really well along in the direction. Like, take a look at what VAST is up to. They are very close to actually being able to launch a space station. But that is assuming that there is a business model, and the business model is going to hold. And so you just never know how this is all going to play out. With a government-run space station, you have this guarantee. So there's many different possibilities. One possibility is that everything goes great. The private space stations are doing well. There is booming business. There's a need for research on board these space stations. People are able to pay them for occupancy on these stations, and the stations are able to pay for their launch costs, and the system works, and you have the beginnings of this nascent space-based infrastructure. That would probably be the perfect outcome if we got that. In the same way that we have private infrastructure for airplanes and airports and things like that, right? Hotels, like you don't have government running these kinds of things. This comes out of demand from the marketplace. So that would be sort of like the dream, is that we are no longer in the, it takes government to even make this thing work. Now we're in this place where these things just happen, and government is one customer among many. But the other possibility is that we're just not ready, that it's just too expensive, that the business model isn't there, that the customers aren't there, that these things will launch, but they won't be able to have enough funding to be able to continue to launch other modules. And eventually these things will have to be deorbited, and then there will be no space station in space except for the countries that are willing to invest in these things on an ongoing basis. Right now, that's China. And India is planning on building their space station in the next couple of years. And maybe that's the best partnership, right? India is an ally of Europe and the United States. And maybe the Indians will build a space station, and then NASA will build a module, and they'll attach that module to the Indian space station. And then there will be a NASA presence, and maybe even a European presence in space. I think that would be great. That would work very, very well. So, I think there's still so much science that needs to be done. We don't have the questions answered about long-term habitation in space, what it does to the human body. There are still too many science experiments to be run. Even though the International Space Station has been continuously inhabited for almost 30 years now, we don't have all the answers, that there's still tons and tons of work to be done. We're just starting to figure out material science that can be done in space. So I think there is value there for a space station. And you've got the NASA contracts, the Commercial Lunar Partnership, where you've got all these landers that have been going to the surface of the moon. Most of them have crashed. Blue Ghost was successful. But NASA says that just in 2027 alone, they're going to send 30 landers to the moon. That's a lot of business the landing companies can use to develop their technology, their infrastructure, and bring on more customers to be able to do that work. So we stand at a crossroads now. It might be that now is the time for us to be able to switch to a sort of commercially sustained private space exploration process, but maybe we're a little too early and the whole thing is going to collapse in on itself. We'll have to find out. Chiron, what are some sci-fi themes or stories that you would like to see be written? Man, this is so tough because there are incredible science fiction stories that have yet to be adapted. The fact that we've seen how well The Martian and Project Hail Mary have gone off, I would suspect that if anybody actually makes a version of We Are Legion, I Am Bob, the Bobiverse books, they'll do very well. Like someone pick up that IP. Come on, get on it. Because it's of a very similar genre, and I think has lots of humor, cool ideas. I think it'll go really well. But the amount of science fiction books out there is just bottomless. Like there are so many incredible science fiction books that have been written. I think about a lot of the work by Neil Stephenson. Some of it was probably unfilmable is maybe the problem. William Gibson, Isaac Asimov, some Isaac Asimov stuff has been done. Obviously, we've seen The Foundation. There was I, Robot, Bicentennial Man. So some of it has been hit or miss. But I think there's this kind of more modern age where directors are getting, good directors are getting their hands on beloved pieces of science fiction and doing a good job. And so I have faith, but there's almost too much of it. And instead, the movie industry is doing very formulaic. Let's make a sequel to Star Wars. Let's make a sequel to Avengers. And I've been ranting and railing against this for years now. The movie studios, they spend so much money making a movie that it has to be a hit. And so they go for an established intellectual property. They go for the sequel. They go for a known piece of intellectual property, as opposed to taking a risk on something that is new and weird and different and interesting and maybe has a cult following, but maybe doesn't, maybe came out of nowhere. And yet some of the best sci-fi movies have come from them picking up some story. Like think about Edge of Tomorrow, the Tom Cruise movie. That was great. What a great movie. It's probably in my top 10. I really liked it. And it is a adaptation of a Japanese novel called All You Need Is Kill. I think it was called. I read it in English. And yet they were able to turn it into a really great movie. Very different from the book, and yet had some of the sort of core ideas, and they were able to make it come together. So there are so many sci-fi books, and I love them to just try. Like just take a crack at it. Spend a few tens of millions, maybe 100 million, try to make a movie out of Revelation Space or of the Culture series or whatever. Give it a try, as opposed to make another sequel or reboot an old movie that is 30 years old. Like, please stop. Save that money. Spend it on trying experiments. It's time to shout out all the new $5 patrons and above. Ms. Wife, Maxim, Corbinet, Gerald Blakefield, Clarence Rowe, Christian, Mike Ellis, Rye Guy, Janice Akalovs, and Michelle L. Join the club at patreon.com/universe today. Melon Toria. What do you think about the Canadian rocket companies like Reaction Dynamics that got contracts from the Canadian Space Agency to develop domestic launch capacity? Yeah, this is really cool. So there is a launch facility being built in Nova Scotia, and a bunch of Canadian companies have gotten contracts to work on that. In fact, one of them is one of the sponsors that I say every single week here. So if you look, I say Nordspace. And Nordspace is one of our Masters of the Universe patrons, and they are also one of the companies that was awarded a contract for helping to build rockets that are going to be launched from this Canadian launch facility. And so that's great. Like, I think, this is one of those things that we should have the ability to launch rockets. We have aerospace engineers. We have an incredible aerospace engineering program here in Canada with many universities. And in the past, the thing you wanted to do is you wanted to get a job in the United States. You wanted to go, or Europe, but you want to go to the States. You want to go work at NASA. You want to go work at SpaceX. People don't want that anymore. Right. And so now there is a sort of pent up demand. Like, let's give these people a home here in Canada. Let's make an incredible world-class rocket facility. Let's launch polar orbit rockets, or maybe eventually our rocket sort of ecosystem will get so good that we will be able to participate in other rocket launches, work with the European Space Agency, and work with NASA to help make their rockets better. So, I think this is all moving in the right direction. These are the kinds of technologies that we should invest, because, for me growing up working in technology, the dream was that you would go down to Silicon Valley, you go work in, start up a company in the United States. And that is not the dream anymore. But we've got all these people with all these technological skills that need to find homes and jobs and be able to do this work locally. Otherwise, they're going to go to Europe, or they're going to go to China, right? Matthew, hypothetically, if there was life around Proxima Centauri and we had a powerful enough telescope to see them walking around, would we see them as they were 4 years ago or in real time? 4 years ago. Yeah, so that's what, the speed of light. That's what light years means. Proxima Centauri is over 4 light years away from us. And so it takes light on the surface of Proxima Centauri 4 years to get to us. But it's not just light. Like, if they were broadcasting radios from their radio stations, if they had air traffic control systems, if they were shining a powerful laser at us, it would take 4 years. If Proxima Centauri was emitting gravitational waves, it would take 4 years for those gravitational waves to get to us, or 4.3 years. Anyway, everything we see out in the universe is in the past. And that's why James Webb was built. It is looking at galaxies as they appeared just a couple 100 million years after the Big Bang. It's not seeing those galaxies as they look today. If it could see them, they would look like spiral galaxies like the Milky Way, but it is seeing them as they were being constructed early on in the universe at the very limits of what it can see. You're seeing the moon as it looked 1.3 seconds ago. You're seeing the sun as it looked 8 minutes and 20 seconds ago. Did you know that you can watch the same video with no ads and get a bonus question over on Patreon completely for free? We call it Q&A Plus. And this week's bonus, I give a rundown of all my telescopes. And I'll put a link in the show notes. All right, those are all the questions that we had this week. Thank you, everyone who joined me for the live show, everybody who asked your questions into the YouTube comments. I'm going to sort of explain my new journey into retro gaming, but first, I'd like to thank our patrons. Thanks to Abe Kingston, Andrea Pedretti, Brian Bodie, Karen, Chuck Hawkins, Commander Baylock, Dark Finga, David Gilton, and David Matz, and Thrallo Reading and Math for Toddlers, Evan.Pro, James Clark, Jeremy Mattern, Jim Burke, Marcel Smits, Michael Purcell, NASA Ocean Guy, Nordspace, OneStepForAnimals.org. Please follow my nephew at VBrick6994, Renkaidu, Richard Williams, Sean Sargent, Stephen Fallon-Munley, Team 49, Telescopes Canada, Vlad Chaplin, Wolfgang Klatz, Zelda Sorry, the loose blue-booted moose looped round 9 narrow Luna... Once again. Zelda Sorry, the loose blue-booted moose looped around 9 narrow lunar lava tubes. About time, eh? Who support us at the Master of the Universe level, and all our patrons. All your support means the universe to us. So if you have been watching my channel for a while, you know that I am an avid gamer, and I was a PC gamer, and more recently I have switched to playing exclusively on handhelds. And the handheld that I like best is my Steam Deck. Now, the problem is that Steam Decks are really expensive these days. And, one of these, which I think I paid 500 Canadian for it, almost like within a few months of when they were first released. And I still play it every day. They've gotten so expensive thanks to the RAM apocalypse. These things are now more than $1,000. The Steam machine is going to be even more expensive, but I really like the form factor and being able to access my Steam library. And the retro gaming Android devices have sort of exploded onto the scene, and now people are able to get these things for a fraction of the price of what you would have to pay for a Steam Deck. So I want to share just a couple of the devices that I'm using now. So one is the Cain Odin 3, and this is a smaller device. I think it's like about a 6-inch screen, pretty fast. It uses a Snapdragon processor, and there's a bunch of really great support on Android now. There's a program called Game Native where you sign into your Steam account, and then it will let you play Steam games like it's a little mini Steam Deck on this smaller device. And these things only cost $279-ish US, so a fraction of the price of a Steam Deck. And if you're looking to play like mostly indie games, Celeste, Stardew Valley, Battle Brothers, like the kinds of games, the sort of the complexity of the games that I like to play. You know, I'm not looking to play AAA titles. These are really affordable. And then I've got the Retroid. I kind of went a little crazy. So I've got the Retroid Pocket 6, and this is even smaller and lighter and really great for taking on a trip. And this was $229 US. And then to really sort of jump into nostalgia, there's even smaller devices you can get. I got this on Alibaba. This is a Miu Mini Plus, and it is just like a little console game that you can play like super old games. And you can actually buy old games on GOG, Good Old Games. There's some old games you can buy on Steam, and then there's newer platforms like itch.io that you can actually buy games from. So you can connect up your Steam account, or you can just buy these games directly for these little devices. And you know, if you're like wishing you could buy a Steam Deck, I super recommend the Retroid Pocket 6 as a sort of nice, lightweight, portable, play your Steam games wherever you go. Man, what a time. All right. We'll see you next time.